The first time I heard my sister praised. For my idea, I was standing at the back of a crowded conference hall in California holding a paper cup of coffee that had already gone cold, while strangers applauded a future I had built quietly and carefully. The screen behind her glowed with concepts that had once existed only in my private notebooks, and the audience leaned forward as if witnessing something groundbreaking, never questioning how easily she carried knowledge that had never truly belonged to her. That was the moment I understood that betrayal does not always arrive loudly or violently. Sometimes it arrives polished, confident, and smiling beneath bright lights, using your work to introduce itself to the world while you stand invisible in the crowd. What hurt the most was not the applause. It was the certainty in her voice, as if the idea had always belonged to her. My name is Alana. I have always been more comfortable inside ideas than in front of people. I observe patterns, question motives, and think deeply before acting. Over years of quiet work, I developed a predictive life pattern intelligence concept, capable of forecasting human decisions before they happen, fully aware of its power and the responsibility it carried. My idea predictive life pattern intelligence is basically about using data and patterns to predict what someone might do next. Think of it like a super smart algorithm that analyzes your habits, choices, and surroundings to forecast your future decisions. My sister Marissa thrives on attention and knows how to command a room. She speaks with confidence, sells vision effortlessly, and understands how ideas sound, even when she does not fully understand how they work. She knew about my project long before the world did. The investor Richard is a respected advisor who values momentum and presentation. He believes confidence signals intelligence and rarely looks beneath polished delivery. Marissa impressed him quickly, and once he believed in her, questions stopped mattering. Our mother Helen believes peace matters more than truth. She avoids conflict, protects appearances, and encourages silence when honesty threatens harmony, even when that silence costs someone deeply. After that conference, everything accelerated. Articles surfaced celebrating Marissa as a visionary founder with an uncanny understanding of human behavior. Interviews framed her as rare, instinctive, and brilliant. Investors leaned forward. Industry voices nodded approvingly, and I watched from the margins as my work gained a public life without my name attached to it. The platform itself had not failed yet, which made the situation feel even more surreal. Early predictions worked well enough to impress people who did not understand what they were actually seeing. Surface-level logic created the illusion of mastery, and illusion was all Marissa needed. But I knew the truth. I knew where the system was fragile. I knew where shallow understanding would collapse. I knew which decisions required depth rather than confidence. Marissa did not know that. Richard did not know that. My family did not know that. And I stayed silent, not out of fear, but out of calculation. Timing mattered more than confrontation. A business that claims it understands human behavior cannot afford to be wrong, even once, especially when scrutiny deepens and expectations rise. The closer the platform moved towards scale, pressure, and real-world consequences, the closer it came to revealing who had built it and who had merely learned how to speak about it. I was not angry yet. I was watching. Because when foresight meets arrogance, the ending does not need force. It only needs time. Time did exactly what I knew it would do. It rewarded confidence first and questioned substance later. After that conference, Marissa's world expanded rapidly, almost violently, as if success had been waiting for her permission to exist. Invitations arrived. Panels requested her presence. Articles multiplied. Every mention of the platform framed it as revolutionary, unsettling its accuracy, and visionary in its ambition. The business was now described as something that could see people before they saw themselves. That phrase appeared everywhere. Investors repeated it. Journalists loved it. And every time I read it, my chest tightened. Not from pride, but from the weight of knowing how fragile that claim truly was. Marissa leaned into the attention naturally. She adjusted her language to sound thoughtful rather than technical, visionary rather than cautious. She spoke about ethical responsibility, in vague terms, borrowing phrases I had once used privately, never realizing she did not understand the boundaries those phrases were meant to enforce. She did not see the difference between prediction and assumption, between probability and certainty. I did. The platform's early success made people careless. Initial datasets were small, controlled, and forgiving. The predictions appeared impressive because they operated within narrow conditions where surface logic could survive. Small behavior clusters, limited time frames, predictable outcomes. It was the stage where confidence looked identical to competence. Richard became louder in his praise. He spoke about Marissa as if she were a rare mind, someone born to lead a future shaped by intelligence and foresight. He introduced her to decision-makers who trusted his judgment without questioning its foundation. In meetings I was never invited to, she spoke about scaling, expansion, and global relevance, repeating phrases that sounded right while skipping over the questions that mattered. The family followed suit. Helen's pride grew visibly. She shared articles. She spoke about Marissa with admiration that bordered on relief, as if one child's public success validated years of quiet parenting decisions. When she spoke to me, her tone softened in a way that felt dismissive, encouraging patience, framing my silence as wisdom rather than self-restraint. She did not ask how I felt. She did not ask what I had lost. I stopped trying to explain. Explanation required an audience willing to listen, and mine had already chosen its hero. From the outside, I appeared detached, almost indifferent. From the inside, I was observing everything with precision. I tracked how Marissa described the system over time. I noticed when her explanations drifted. I saw where she leaned on buzzwords instead of clarity. I recognized the moments when questions were redirected rather than answered. Most importantly, I recognized when the business crossed into territory it was not prepared to handle. The first warning sign came quietly. A mid-sized corporate client requested deeper customization. They wanted predictions tied to long-term behavioral shifts rather than short-term patterns. They asked questions about ethical safeguards, about bias correction, about decision influence rather than observation. Marissa approved the expansion quickly. Too quickly. She did not consult the framework. She did not recognize the risk. She did not understand that the system's deeper layers required a different logic entirely. She approved changes that looked impressive on a pitch deck but destabilized the model beneath. I felt something shift then. Not panic, not fear, recognition. The moment had arrived. I began organizing my work deliberately. Not emotionally, not defensively, but structurally. I revisited my original notebooks, the ones dated and archived long before Marissa's name appeared publicly. I reviewed early drafts, logic trees, and decision maps. I refined projections I had already made months earlier, including the exact conditions under which the system would fail if pushed prematurely. I did not share this with anyone. I did not warn her. I allowed momentum to continue. Because there is a difference between sabotage and consequence. I was not creating her downfall. I was simply allowing her to walk into a reality she did not understand. As the platform grew, expectations grew faster. Media narratives shifted from curiosity to reliance. The business was no longer framed as experimental. It was framed as authoritative. People trusted its forecasts. Companies adjusted strategies based on its insights. That shift made every future error dangerous. I knew exactly which one would come first. Internally, the system began producing inconsistencies, subtle at first, slightly delayed predictions, behavioral forecasts that conflicted with observed outcomes, small deviations that could be explained away individually but formed a pattern. When viewed together, Marissa dismissed them, Richard dismissed them. No one wanted to slow growth with uncomfortable questions. I watched as Marissa's confidence hardened into certainty. She stopped speaking cautiously. She stopped acknowledging limits. She spoke as if the system could not be wrong, because admitting the possibility would fracture the narrative she had built around herself. That arrogance did something important. It removed all doubt when the truth finally surfaced. By the time investors requested a comprehensive predictive audit, the platform was already exposed internally. Not broken yet, not collapsed, just unstable enough that any serious scrutiny would reveal its weaknesses. I was invited to observe the audit indirectly, not as a creator, not as an authority, simply as someone familiar with analytical review. No one recognized the irony. I said nothing. The audit uncovered inconsistencies that could not be explained by market fluctuation alone. Predictions failed under pressure. Ethical safeguards lacked clarity. Behavioral assumptions showed gaps that indicated surface understanding rather than deep design. Marissa could not answer the questions that followed, not because she was careless, but because she did not know. That was when I stepped forward, not emotionally, not dramatically but precisely. I presented what I had always had: a clear, documented framework, early projections that matched current failures exactly, ethical boundaries that explained why expansion had triggered instability, logic maps that demonstrated how the system should have evolved and why it had not. The room shifted, not toward anger, toward clarity. Richard looked at me differently, for the first time, not as Marissa's quieter sister, but as the mind he had never questioned. Helen's pride faltered quietly, replaced by confusion she did not yet understand. Marissa said nothing. She could not, because the truth did not accuse her. It simply existed, and existence was enough. By the end of that week, trust began to evaporate. Not explosively, methodically. Investors paused. Media interest cooled. Advisors requested deeper involvement rather than blind confidence. The spotlight dimmed, and without it, Marissa looked smaller, uncertain, exposed. The idea had not failed. The illusion had. And I knew the final moment would not be loud. It would be irreversible. The collapse did not come with shouting or accusations. It arrived quietly, carried by documentation, timelines, and the uncomfortable weight of facts that refused to bend. That was the kind of ending I had always known this would have. Not dramatic chaos, not public spectacle, but the slow realization that something precious had been built on borrowed understanding. Once doubt entered the room, it stayed. Investors did not withdraw immediately. They asked questions. They requested revisions. They wanted clarity. Each request exposed another layer of Marissa's limitations. She could repeat ideas convincingly, but she could not defend them when challenged. She could speak about vision, but she could not explain structure. She could describe outcomes, but she could not justify mechanisms. And every time she failed to answer, my presence became louder without me saying a word. Richard attempted to manage the situation. He reframed narratives, slowed public communication, and tried to protect Marissa's image by shifting responsibility toward market unpredictability. But unpredictability had never been the issue. The issue was depth. And depth cannot be improvised. I was formally invited into the project soon after. Not as support, not as an assistant, as a corrective force. They asked me to evaluate the platform honestly. I did not soften my assessment. I did not exaggerate flaws. I explained exactly what the system was capable of, what it was not, and how it had been pushed beyond ethical and structural limits by leadership that misunderstood its foundation. The room listened. That was the moment everything changed. Marissa sat quietly during those discussions. She did not interrupt. She did not argue. Her confidence had drained away, replaced by something fragile and unfamiliar. I watched her realize that intelligence could not be borrowed forever. That recognition without understanding eventually turns into exposure. Helen avoided my eyes during this period, not out of anger, but discomfort. She was beginning to understand that her silence had been a choice, and that choice had consequences she could not undo. She had celebrated one daughter's rise without questioning another's disappearance. Families often confuse fairness with peace. Peace, I had learned, is often just avoidance dressed politely. The official review concluded weeks later. The findings were precise. The original conceptual framework belonged to me. The predictive logic, ethical guardrails, and long-term scalability models were all traced back to my documented work. Marissa's contributions were identified as presentational and managerial, not foundational. The board made its decision without drama. Control of the intellectual property was reassigned. Marissa was removed from leadership, not fired publicly, not humiliated, simply replaced. Her punishment was not scandal. It was irrelevance. The business survived. In fact, it stabilized quickly once grounded in reality. Expansion slowed. Integrity returned. Trust rebuilt. One accepted leadership under conditions that protected the system from misuse and protected myself from future erasure. Marissa did not fight the decision. She could not. There was nothing left to argue. She stopped attending meetings. She withdrew from public view. The family narrative shifted quietly, as these things always do. Her success was no longer discussed. My role was acknowledged cautiously, as if saying it too loudly might reopen wounds no one wanted to examine. I did not confront her. I did not need to. The truth had already done what confrontation never could. Richard resigned shortly after. His credibility had fractured beyond repair. Investors remembered who he had trusted without verification. Influence does not disappear instantly, but it weakens when judgment proves flawed. Helen tried to speak to me once. She framed it as regret, but it sounded more like confusion. She asked how she could have known. I did not answer immediately, because knowing requires asking, and she had not asked. In the end, I did not walk away triumphant. I walked away clear. The idea had returned to its rightful place. My name stood where it always should have. The system evolved responsibly, guided by understanding rather than ambition. Marissa lost more than a business. She lost the version of herself that believed credit could replace competence. And I gained something quieter, but far more powerful. My voice back, my work intact, my future unborrowed. The revenge was complete not because she fell, but because I rose without becoming her. If you will be betrayed by your own blood, would you will stay silent or would you take again which is yours? Belongs to you.